Well, hello again, everybody. Today is Wednesday, March 31st. Welcome back to the Keep Boone Healthy Community Information Channel. I'm David Jackson, President and CEO of the Boone Area Chamber of Commerce. Speaking with Jason Triplett with First Horizon Bank here in Boone. He has been a regular expert that we have sourced many times through this last year when it comes to some of the financial related elements of what we've gone through with COVID-19. And yesterday, the Biden administration announced that there is an extension of the PPP loan period through May 31st. So an additional 2 months from now, the program was set to run out today, as a matter of fact. So this extension will allow for more businesses to gain access to the PPP Loan Program, something that at this time last year, we were really starting to learn about, talking a lot about. And Jason, I think it'd be a good idea maybe just to refresh everybody's mind if they've maybe put PPP on the back burner again. What is this loan program, and maybe even retrospectively, what has it been able to do for small businesses in terms of keeping people afloat and getting some revenue to businesses that were really struggling there for a while?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, David. And again, thanks to the Chamber for doing all this work with, as far as all the information that the Chamber's providing and helping our small businesses through these challenging times these past year. And you're exactly right. This time a year ago was certainly an interesting time for our community and for our country and frankly for our world. But getting back to PPP, just to reiterate what David just said, just as a reminder, everybody, that May 31st is the new deadline. It was supposed to be today. Thankfully, Congress and actually President Biden signed yesterday to extend that to May 31st. So banks will be able to accept both first draw and second draw PPP applications through that date. And then the SBA will actually have another 30 days to process their decision on top of that. So that gives us a little bit of wiggle room all the way through June 30th. But just as a reminder, don't wait till May 31st, please. There's about roughly, call it $72 billion in available funding that's still remaining in the PPP program. So this, there's still plenty of money. There's still opportunities for our small business owners to be able to support, their employees, which is so important during this time frame. But I would advise you to definitely get out there and talk with your bank and get some information on this program and make sure you do it before May 31st, because a lot of banks will stop taking applications just like they did for the March 31st deadline. So you'll probably see a week or two out that the banks will stop taking applications to make sure they have time to process it. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about that.
So, one of the things that we saw, Jason, in reading some of the accounts of how this money has been utilized by small businesses, a number of them here in our community were able to take advantage of that first draw. They may have been able to, absolve themselves of those funds, go through the spending process of that, and then turn around and get that second draw out. Have you seen much impact so far from that second ability to draw funds? And is that potentially one of the reasons why this program has been expanded again, because there still is a need out there for some of these small businesses that either haven't accessed the first part yet at all, or are still not quite up to speed enough to where a second draw loan that's also available through this would be helpful and kind of take some of that margin of error away?
Yeah, so we've seen it be a huge help to a lot of businesses that we talked to, both, and actually friends of mine that maybe we didn't help, another bank may have helped. But a lot of folks took advantage, a lot of businesses took advantage of the first draw because at that point in time, we didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know how their businesses were going to be impacted. We didn't know how long they might be closed. And at that point, we were trying to do what? Save jobs. And it certainly, the PPP program was successful in that. There is no doubt that thousands of jobs right here in the high country were saved because of the PPP funds that were able to get some folks through a tough time this time last year. So fast forward to the second draw, we're seeing less demand than first draw for a couple of reasons. One, thankfully, some industries were not as impacted as they initially thought that they would be. So certain industries actually thrived during this environment. And we actually had some industries and businesses that were busier than they anticipated, whether it's because folks ended up coming up here to the high country, they felt safe up here and were traveling and whatnot. And even though the restaurants were impacted by governmental issues and constraints around capacity issues, they were able to pivot and whatnot. But definitely our restaurants were certainly the hardest hit. And a lot of those certain industries were taking advantage and needed to save jobs during this time on draw two, or what we call the second draw of the PPP loan process. And the other thing I'll mention about that is a NIAX code starting with a 72, which is restaurants and whatnot. They and hospitality as well. They actually benefit from an additional funding source for the second draw loans as well. So keep that in mind, which is instead of 2.5 times monthly payroll, which is just like the first draw was, that NIAX code starting actually gets to do 3.5 times. So that's another way that the government and the banks have stepped up to help those industries that are still being impacted by the things from COVID. So we're excited to be able to continue to help. So we are seeing less demand, David, to answer your question in round two. I would say about 35% of the businesses that applied in the first draw have applied for the second draw. Again, primary reason is, some just don't have a need this second round. And then the other reason is there is a caveat for the second draw, the PPP loan, that you had to have at least a 25% reduction in revenue for one quarter in 2020 compared to the same quarter, and I highlight the same quarter in 2019. So an example, if second quarter 2020, when most businesses were impacted the most by COVID and in some cases closed by the government, if you compare your revenues in second quarter 2020 to your revenues or gross revenues in that same quarter or second quarter 2019, that has to be a 25% reduction. So just one thing to keep in mind, and that's one of the other reasons why a few folks were not eligible for the second draw process. The other change from the first draw is you can only have up to 300 employees versus in the first draw, you could have up to 500 employees. So another thing to kind of point out in the differences.
And I think, again, an important point to underscore as well, there is still opportunity for some businesses to take advantage of a first draw in this situation. While that might be the rarity, there are some that, because especially of the tourism schedule up here, it could be that March, April, May begins to be that time where things get a little bit leaner along those lines. So can you maybe go over real quickly some of the things that are important for people to consider if, for instance, they were taking this loan extension period to maybe apply for funds for the first time?
Sure, and that's a great point, David. I would agree. There definitely could be businesses maybe that everything that was moving, they just didn't understand how it worked, or didn't get in there in time, or to your point, were just trying to survive and get through and just didn't get a chance. So absolutely, please apply for a first draw. Most banks, to my knowledge, are accepting both first and second draws. The main difference with a first draw is that, it's 500 employees or less. The maximum loan size is 10 million versus 2 million for the second draw. There's no revenue reduction. So what I just said about the revenue reduction only applies to the second draw on the 25% revenue reduction in a quarter, or by the way, that's for a full year too. So for first draw, none of that applies. It's all the same rules that were in place. Now, granted, they were getting changed every day by the government and whatnot, but now it's kind of, it's a little more formalized. So this time around, you just want to make sure that you use the funds over your covered period, which is a range between 8 weeks and 24 weeks. You get to choose. That's a change from last year, by the way. And this is applicable to the first draw loans as well as the second draw loans. But you just want to make sure you use at least 60% of that revenue for payroll. My recommendation is use 100% of it for payroll. And we might talk about that in the forgiveness if we get to that, David. But the reason for that is you can easily remember it's going to take your average monthly payroll. This is again for first draw and for second draw for that matter. But you're going to take your average monthly payroll for probably 2019. You're going to multiply that by 2.5, which is going to give you your loan amount. Then you're going to spend that money between 8 weeks and 24 weeks. And that's what's called your covered period. And what I'm suggesting to people is choose 12 weeks or 13 weeks or 14 weeks that you're going to spend that first draw or second draw. And that way you use 100% of it on payroll. And the reason for that is it just makes your forgiveness process and your forgiveness paperwork a whole lot easier. And when the government extended it to 24 weeks, that made it a whole lot easier to use 100% on payroll. So you don't have to. You can also use it for utilities and rent and interest on a loan, and and then there's other things like COVID related, where if you've had to do some expenses related to COVID that are specific to that, that now applies, and even some software and other stuff. Anyway, just don't make it harder than it has to be, would be my suggestion and advice to you. Use it on payroll. You should easily be able to do that with an extended up to 24 weeks. So again, please, the extension applies for May 31st for both first draw loans and second draw loans. So if you've never taken a PPP loan and you think it would benefit you and your business and help your employees, I encourage you to do that.
So that leads us into the last point, and you hit on it a second ago, is the forgiveness element of this. And there are some people that have completed their first draw process or getting ready to, that have heard a lot of different things, little nuances change about forgiveness paperwork, especially for a number of folks in this area. I'm sure with loans less than $150,000, that process being simplified some. Can you just kind of give us a status update on where that is and what people should be mindful of as they get ready for that process?
Sure. Great question, David. And I would encourage folks to definitely look at the SBA website. And if we have time, we may even log on real quick and just share a screen and show you that, just to kind of maneuver through that. But there's 3 forms that the government's they rolled these out, and the final one anyway, which is called a SBA form 3508S. And that is probably what the majority of the listeners today are going to utilize. And that is for PPP forgiveness application. It's roughly 1 page, and it's basically answer a few questions. You're verifying, you're basically signing off that I use this money appropriately. You're attesting to that. I followed the rules. Again, primarily the rules would be you used at least 60% of the money on payroll. You needed that money to kind of be able to pay your people and survive at that period in time. And you're just attesting to that. And that's all you have to do. You don't have to provide the bank anything. And that's for loan amounts. Let me clarify this too. On first draw, this loan amounts up to $150,000, so that you'll use the 3508S PPP forgiveness. Now, I clarify first draw. Now that's true for second draw. The same forgiveness applications apply for both draws. It's just right now the SBA, nor is any bank, you haven't used, if someone's done a second draw, they probably haven't even used the money yet, right? Or there hasn't been enough time. So right now, all forgiveness applications are first draw only. And most banks now have a portal that you're probably going to. You won't actually fill out that form. It's probably an automated system. Some banks you'll actually use the actual form and submit that. It just depends on which bank. But just make sure you contact your bank and get specific information that they may have and how you actually process that forgiveness. Because a lot of them, it's going to be a portal that you go in and do the application online. Then it prints out the 3508S form that then you digitally sign with DocuSign. I know that's how First Horizon does it. And I know many of my friends in the banking industry, that's how they're doing it as well. So it's a very easy process. I kid you not, it would probably take you 5 minutes, maybe 10. It's not overwhelming. It's not overly cumbersome. You're just going in and signing off on a few things. Now that's for the 3508S, which is 150,000 or less. Now, if you go above that up to $2 million in a PPP loan, then you're gonna fill out what's called a 3508EZ, and you do have to answer 3 questions that they'll ask you, and that they've got to make sure that it qualifies you for the EZ form. And if it does, it is also less work, but you will have to upload information such as payroll records. So you want to make sure you have your payroll records, and which would be like, for instance, one of the things that you need are your payroll records that you would supply for to the government, as far as your quarterlies and stuff like that, as far as that you would want to give both on the federal level and on the state level. A lot of folks don't realize you have to provide it on the state level for unemployment insurance. So the same forms you're sending in for your quarterly as far as payroll records goes, that's the same thing that you're going to provide the bank to verify. You also may have to provide bank statements to also show where the payroll was spent on your bank statements, and that's got to match up to your loan amount. So if you're above 150,000, just be prepared to share some information on that as well.
Well, and Jason, if you're in a position to do it now, maybe you can show us that that SBA page, just so people that were at one point in time at this time of year last year getting more familiar with the SBA website. They've changed and made some things a little bit more accessible. If you'd like to share that, maybe now would be a good time for that.
Do that, David. So hopefully you can see my screen.
We can.
Okay, so this is just sba.gov. And they made it a little bit more user friendly. So just a couple of pieces here. So if you click on this COVID-19 relief options, so again, www.sba.gov, click on learn more, and this is going to take you to their main page for as far as COVID and other things, as far as the idle loan and other things, the shuttered venues, which would apply to certain places like the Appalachian Theater, for example. But where I would go then is click on this Paycheck Protection Program, click on Learn More. And this is going to give you a lot of good information that you might want to look at if you want to learn a little bit more of the details around forgiveness, around the first draw, around the second draw. So if you just click on any of this information, if you want to learn more about first draw, click here. If you want to learn more about second draw, click here. If you want to learn more about PPP forgiveness, we'll click on that. And then it's going to show you all of those forms that I was just describing. So it's going to talk to you about the PPP draw forgiveness. You see on here about the 60% at a minimum spent on payroll costs. That all applies to first draw and second draw. And then down here, if you go, it explains what you need to do. First thing you do is talk to your bank. Reach out to the bank that did the original loan. They're going to be the bank that's going to do the forgiveness application. This walks you through there, and then down at the bottom are the forms that I just discussed, the 3508S, 3508EZ, and the PPP loan. So this is just some good information that I thought it'd be good to just kind of show you how to get to this, because it can be overwhelming. And again, utilize that for our business owners if you want additional information, if we can be of further help.
Well, excellent. Well, Jason, not only are you a man with a lot of information, but you're a man with technology as well. And we appreciate both, and certainly appreciate the fact that you have made this simple process for many to understand, as we've seen so much change with this. And again, for some, it's been on the back burner for a little while, and now all of a sudden you see PPP back in the news, and it's helpful to have a refresher. So appreciate your time in doing that, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right. Thank you, David. I appreciate it. Have a great day.